What is the aim of the process of historical revisionism in Croatia, and what is the role of concentration camp Jasenovec within the narrative?
Room for the longer explanation, at least longer. I don't know how long will it last, but the basic question when we speak about Croatian revisionism is, to make a long story short, who was during the Second World War on the wrong and who was on the right side. Of course, from my anti-fascist but liberal democratic point of view, take it as you wish, because it's more or less the same position. So liberal democratic, of course, the partisans were on the right side, and all the others, Ustasha, Chetniks, Domobrans in Slovenia, were on the wrong side. So there is no much space for debating that question. There is no space. For me, it's something what is pretext or what is introduction to any serious conversation about the Second World War. Nevertheless, there are revisionists in Croatia who deny that and with whom you practically cannot speak. The revisionism in Croatia has three roots. It stems from the first fact that it was something during the period of socialistic Yugoslavia you couldn't discuss. It was a taboo theme. Nobody was speaking about the victims at the end of the war, after the war, from the Ustasha side. In May 1945, when Ustasha armies was retreating from Zagreb and central parts of Croatia towards Austria to escape partisans and Soviet army, Red Army, and to enter the British controlled territory in Austria in order to they thought that the British will not surrender them to the partisans. What happened? There were many war criminals within their ranks. About 100,000 Ustasha were retreating from Croatia. Many of them were war criminals, at least I would say. It's hard to say how many, but 10 to 20,000, yes, they were people who were killing or who were responsible for deportations, plundering during the war. So many people, thousands of them, committed war crimes, including crime of genocide. And there were many people who were, I would say, at least innocent. If not innocent, then they maybe did something, but they definitely didn't deserve to be killed. Nevertheless, at the end of the war, it was kind of revenge. It was also revenge. It was also squaring accounts with the class enemy. That was some kind of. There was an element of socialistic or communist revolution. At the end, many people who were killed, some of them were, or many of them were criminals, but some of them didn't deserve that, and some of them were, I would say, innocent. That was the core, and 45 years nobody could, or at least we didn't have opportunity to get full truth. I knew something about that. Not because I was studying that at the university as a student of history. but because my father told me, I read certain things, so I knew that there were some nasty things happening at the end of the war. That the new socialistic authorities, the partisans, did some things which are not appropriate. But this is one thing. The other thing was, the other element was that those who wanted to commemorate innocent victims after the war didn't, in fact, wanted to commemorate those people, or at least it was not the only aim they had, the only goal. They were also trying to redesign the history in order to neglect or completely annihilate the criminal character of the independent state of Croatia, which was criminal in its very character. So there is no doubt that this so-called independent state of Croatia, Ustaša stat, committed genocide against the Serbs, Roma, and the Jews, and the mass crimes against their own civilian population. When I say their own, that means the Croats, not only Catholics, but as Ustaša were saying that the Muslims, Bosnian Muslims, or today Bosniaks, are also Croats of the Islamic, but Croats of the Islamic faith. They were also, some of them joined the Ustaša ranks during the war and were also the victims at the end of the war. And some of them were, of course, also responsible for the war crimes during the war. So, the third, but they didn't want to, let's say, they didn't have any kind of empathy towards the victims of their own regime. They were trying to revive the sentiments towards the Ustaša state, saying that, well, okay, somebody committed certain crimes. Maybe those crimes were relatively big. Nevertheless, the Chetniks and the partisans did many more crimes, more numerous. Victims on our side are more numerous than on the other side. That was also some kind of attempt to relativize the criminal character of the Ustaša regime. And then what they are doing, or what they are attempting to do, is to balance this criminal character of both regimes. So in order to neglect or even annihilate that criminal character, they are trying especially in last couple of years, to balance these two criminal characters of both regimes, communist on one hand and vice versa on the other hand, the Ustaša regime, which is completely unacceptable, and there is no way to confront or to balance the atrocities made by both regimes. And the third one, why Croatian revisionism became stronger and stronger, that we had the same development in the late 80s, that means 30 years ago, in Serbia, with first of all the Serbian national movement led by Milosevic, Slobodan Milosevic, was insisting that was some kind of side event. That means that was not only, that was some kind of historical explanation of why the Serbs should enter the war, that many were saying, okay, we have to make some kind of revenge because 700,000 people have been killed in Jasenovac by the Ustaša, so as the Croats are 4 or 5 million all in all, the population, that means that 700,000 means that in every family, there was one killer who killed one person, then in every family you have one killer, one murderer. That means that the whole nation is genocidal by its nature. And this created this myth of the genocidal nature of the Croats. which was developed and largely became some kind of propaganda in the late 80s at the beginning of the 90s in Serbia during the war. And of course, there was no doubt that there will be a counter reaction from the Croatian, from the pro-Ustasha side. This happened. Of course, there was also a revival of Chetnik sentiment with all this process of rehabilitation of Draža Mihailović, the leader of the Chetniks, and the Chetnik movement in general. Those people were saying that we had two liberation movements. One was the partisan, the other is Chetnik, which is completely, once again, unacceptable. It's historical truth. It's something much, much different from the things those people are saying. Chetniks were also not anti-fascist, but a criminal movement which committed genocide against the Bosniaks and the Croats, not on so large scale, but against the Croats as well, in Bosnia and in Croatia. They were not anti-Semitic as the Ustasha were, but there were no Jews in the Chetnik movement. Jews were avoiding to join the Chetniks because the Chetniks were closely and quite frankly cooperating not only with the Italians, but with the Italian fascists, but also with the Nazis. So they knew that if they were afraid that the Chetniks will transfer them to the Nazis, and there were no Jews in the Chetnik movement. These are roots, or let's say elements which largely contributed to for the development of the Croatian revisionism. Of course, there is also a huge responsibility on political elites, particularly in the last 4 years, from 2015, which not only, and in the 90s as well, which not only didn't know how to cope with this revisionism, but in some elements, in some situations, they were also helping or inciting it. Not maybe directly, but indirectly as well. So now we are where we are, in a quite bad situation. The problem is that our kids, younger generation, is not fully informed about the events during the Second World War in Croatia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's not. They have some very, I would say, strange, if they have any, if they know anything or understand anything about the Second World War, they are. Their knowledge is quite, I would say, small and inadequate, and they do not understand the basic. They do not know the basic facts and do not understand the basic things during the war. It's not only the question of memory, culture of memory, which is extremely bad now in the country. It's not only about that. The problem with the Ustasha, if you promote Ustasha and their values, you are in a way unable to join, to participate in the modern society, because with Ustashism, or National Socialism, with hatred which is promoted against the others and the different, that means drugi and drugačiji, you cannot live as the nation or among the nations today in a globalized world, or as a person, an individual, together with the others. Because if you are intending to go around and saying you are, I don't know, you are Serbian, you are Jewish, you are Muslim doesn't, it simply doesn't work. It's something what modern society, global civilization is trying to suppress. And well, we are confronted with so many challenges which sometimes enables us to do what I'm saying should be done. But on one hand, on the other hand, we have to insist on that. And with Ustashism, not only the individual, but the whole society is becoming disabled in a way to join, to participate in this global development and globalization as a process.
Before going to dismantle really the myth of Jasenovac, that I think it's very important to discuss, I would like actually to take this opportunity and to ask you of parallel between Ustashism and domobranci. This process is also very present in Slovenia, not so in a such aggressive and violent way, but still I think is organized in the whole space, especially because it's also there imposed this question of rehabilitation of domobranci. And my question will be, because you mentioned Chetniks and Ustasha, if the same could be also attached to domobranci, or historically, and from your view, it's a difference that has to be taken into consideration.
Domobranci in Slovenia, I would say that, okay, of course, they were pro-fascist, they were backing the occupying forces, but they didn't have that kind of genocidal plan which was very characteristic for both, for the Ustasha and for the Chetniks. Therefore, their position is somehow different from the Ustasha and from the Chetniks, but not substantially. That means, okay, they were traitors, and they joined and they were collaborating with the occupying forces. I don't know the reason, maybe somebody can explain me why the Germans were in Maribor, for example, or the Italians were in Ljubljana, and the Germans, that the border between these two occupying forces was somewhere near Ljubljana. What were those occupying forces doing in Slovenia? They were occupiers. They wanted to take something what is not theirs, and it's a very simple truth. So what the domobranci were doing with them? I think that they were collaborating, and to be a collaborator means something, not only in political and historical language, but also in the judicial. So becoming collaborator, you imply certain legal responsibility, which is not, and that poses serious questions. So let's be frank and confront the truth. The difference between the Ustasha and the Chetniks is that the Chetniks didn't have the state. Otherwise, if they have had the state from 41 to 45, I think the scale of the mass crimes committed by the Chetniks would be more or less similar to that of the Ustasha. And the Ustasha killed more Serbs, Roma, and the Jews than the Chetniks killed predominantly Bosnian Muslims or Bosniaks and the Croats. But this is the difference. Ustasha had opportunity to create a state, create independent camps under the supervision, yes, of course, under the supervision of the Nazis, but still they were, let's say, independent in that situation, or more independent than the Chetniks, who were really collaborating quite openly with the Germans almost from the very beginning of the war. but also unable to create certain systems within their occupied the territory to organize prisons, camps, and to massively concentrate the population and then kill them, as the Ustasha had opportunity.
Okay, so if we go now to Jasenovac and try to disentangle this myth of 700,000 victims, and first because exists this super important work that was done by late Slavko Goldstein, the books and really clarification, and you were participating closely. So the question will be if you could open for us this whole arena and say what is about these numbers, what is the last tense approximately, and then how is the function of this myth used actually in the last decades regarding the whole territory of ex-Yugoslavia?
Well, to make long story short, 700,000 was a myth which was created after the war in very particular situation. Yugoslav regime, new Yugoslav regime wanted to present their losses at the peace conference in Paris after the war in 45-46, and then they presented 1.7 million victims of the war, and despite the fact that at that point the researchers came to the calculation that, and which was verified after many years, that the number of victims in all Yugoslavia, from Slovenia on the northwest to Macedonia in the southeast, victims and also soldiers, partisan side, and then all the collaborating forces, civilians, everybody, was the number of victims around 1 million 12,000, 1 million 20,000. So more or less it was that number. Nevertheless, the difference between the presented number at the peace conference from 1 million, what was realistic, to 1.7 million was distributed throughout the media in those times, and we couldn't understand how that difference of 700,000 became in public as the figure, as the number of the victims of Jasenovac, but it was largely distributed as the, let's say, as the number which was killed by the Ustasha throughout the 4 years of war. Nevertheless, there was a census made by the Yugoslav authorities end of 50s, beginning of the 60s, trying to list the victims. And in 64, one research made very thoroughly and quite professionally came to the 59,000 victims of Jasenovac. And then it was made secret because people did understand that the regime was speaking about 700,000, and suddenly you have a research professionally done which says 59,000. So it was top secret, and it was revealed sometimes in the 90s, which was well, we knew that something was, that there was some kind of report. We didn't know where it is. We knew that somewhere in Belgrade. But nevertheless, now we know that in 64, the regime was saying 59,000. And then, step by step, although it was quite clear even in the 60s and in the 70s, that 700,000 could not have been killed in Jasenovac. Because you don't have in that area from where the people were deported, you didn't have so many people. Many of them, the victims of Jasenovac were concentrated in the camp in a, let's say, broader region, but not very far. For example, in Lika, in the south of Croatia, in one kotad of Titova, in those times, Titova Korenica, in Korenica now, in the kotad, in the region of Korenica, some 2,500 Serbs were killed in the camps, but in the camps in Lika, and only 16 of them were killed in Jasenovac. So northern parts of Croatia, northern parts of Bosnia, these were the regions from where the Serbs were deported to Jasenovac. And then you come to the, let's say, then we had demographic statistics. The demographers were dealing with Jasenovac, and they came to the conclusion that, taking into account very many elements, that the number of the victims of Jasenovac should be something between 80,000 and 90,000. The people now, the staff of the Jasenovac museum or memorial site now in Jasenovac are for almost 2 decades working on that list of victims, and they came to the 83,811, I think, because this number is changing on daily basis. Somebody is put on the list. Some others, some persons from time to time are omitted from the list because people there who are working on that list of the victims come across sometimes dubious, sometimes contradictory information. So it's quite complicated. It seems from outside world that it's very easy to do it, but it's sometimes I was working on the list of the victims, and I know how problematic is that job, because you have 1 or 2 documents which says one thing, the other 2 documents saying the other thing. Many problems which you have to resolve, and you are sometimes unable to do it. So, but the Serbian war propaganda in the late 80s and beginning of the 90s was insisting on 700,000 victims of Jasenovac. And then you had the revision equation or pro-Ustaša revisionist answer, which had, let's say, different answers, but all of them were, if not completely avoiding to speak about the victims of Jasenovac, saying that nobody was killed there, almost, some of the revisionists are saying, to the fact that some of the people are saying that in Jasenovac, maybe, I don't know how many, but a couple of thousand, if not a couple of thousand, then 30 to 40,000, and that's the limit, which is not true, because that list in Jasenovac, which consists of 83,000 and so people, is verified. You have so many elements which are known, the name and the surname, mother's name, father's name, when the people were entered the camp, when they were killed, and so on. Some of these elements are not, for some of the victims we don't know, but generally we have that kind of information for many of them. And then the Museum of the Genocide, of the victims of genocide in Belgrade, is also making their list of victims, and they came to 84,000 and something. So I think that we are coming to the end when we are speaking about this ugly, I insist on that, ugly discussion about the number of the victims, because it's not only the number. These are people. These were people who were living their lives, and then suddenly somebody says, because of the race, nationality, religion, you should be sent to Jasenovac and you will be killed. And that's the horrifying dimension of the problem, which people today, particularly in these nationalistic circles in Serbia and Croatia, do not understand. Because it's not about the numbers, it's about the people who were killed. And the end, of course, at the end of the day, we should speak about the numbers. But first of all, we have to understand the horror which was made which was produced in Jasenovac, and the system of industrialized death, which was also imposed or developed there.
Mm-hmm. And what are the similarities between the revisionist discourses in former Yugoslavia and the same discourses in the First World, in the West?
It's difficult to say, because, for example, in the independent state of Croatia, you had different historical context. There are some similarities, but there are differences. Let's say, comparing with Vichy France, or Horthy's Hungary. We are always going back to the Second World War for some particular reasons. Why, if you ask me? Well, in the Ustasha propaganda during the war and today as well, they are just repeating very simple arguments. And this is the Ustasha. They were Croats and they were Catholics. So if they did, and the independent state of Croatia was a national state, which is some kind of final goal of the national history. So when you reach national state, that's the end of history, and we are coming to an end. Everybody will be happy because every citizen, not citizen, because they are not understanding the term citizen, but they are understanding only the Croats. Croats will be happy, and we are entering the new phase of the national history. This is the explanation which completely avoids to speak about Ustashism. The Ustashism was one of the variant of the National Socialism, and it's a mixture, a quite strange mixture of Nazism, German Nazism, and Italian fascism. So there is no doubt about the very nature of or at least for us, the very nature of the Ustasha state. You have this dimension of the Chetnik movement, at least at the beginning of the war. They were presented, or they wanted to be presented as pro-Western or allies of the West, waiting for a propitious moment to organize the uprising, etc., etc. But in fact, what first mass operations showed, they were not fighting the Germans, either the Germans or the Italians, but they were fighting civilians, or they were mass killing of the civilians. Already in eastern Bosnia and east Ustikolina, the first massacre happened in August 41, just a couple of weeks after the partisan uprising started, and then they proceeded with mass killing, genocidal actions against the Muslims, Bosniaks, in the region around Srebrenica. It's not by chance that the same, or more or less the same crime in Foča, this is also the region of Eastern Bosnia where the crimes were once again repeated in the war 92, 90, 95. So there are some, when you are speaking about the similarities, okay, they were collaborating with the Nazis, they committed the genocide, but the concrete situation was quite different. So it's quite, so it's difficult to make, to create or to summarize in a way that everything was the same. You should understand that that very specific context, both in Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then Serbia as well.
Yeah. Speaking of nationalism and nationalist lenses invested into the reproduction of historical revisionism, it seems that some positions, some people usually coming from the right wing, are willingly or not, are not differentiating between the political and ideological allegiances and the members of some people.
Yeah, well, it's the point is, if you have the state, for some people, that's the end of the story. So you have a national state, you don't speak about the character, about the civil rights, about let's say welfare state. That means that I think that it's not about the borders. The state is not only about the borders, it's also about the welfare, well-being, about the good government. And this is what Ustaša state didn't do. But there is a similarity with the situation today. If you are saying, yes, of course, Ustaša were committed genocide and so, or at least some nasty things against the others and the different, nevertheless, it's, but still, they are Croats and they are good Catholics. And they can confess. There is a certain procedure how you do it in the Catholic Church, and then they will be freed. And from the point of view of the Church, sometimes it's easy to relativize the criminal character of the Ustaša state. On the other hand, the communists, maybe they are also Croats, but they are not Catholics because they are anti-religious, so they cannot confess the criminal character of the partisan, alleged criminal character of the partisan movement cannot be annihilated, and this is something what functions in many among numerous circles in Croatia. And then there is also this link towards the 90s, because if you accept the logic that the Ustaša were good, they were good Croats, they loved Croatia, although they committed crimes, but let's put it aside and we don't want to speak about that, then you have the fact that in the 90s, in Croatia, during the war and after the war, there were people who both committed war crimes, on one hand, on the other hand, were corrupted and were guilty or responsible for many acts of corruption, plundering, but there is a certain propaganda from certain political circles which resembles to what Ustaša was saying. So they are Croats, they love Croatia, so we should understand that those people, as they love or loved Croatia so much, shouldn't be seen as traitors or thieves or criminals. And this unfortunately, this logic functions within certain circles today in Croatia and elsewhere. I would say elsewhere, but Croatia is very specific in terms that we passed through the war, and this war is not over in many heads.
Today in Croatia.
Yeah, I would like to go back to this point regarding the Catholic Church, and would like if you could put light onto the implication of the Catholic Church in the historical revisionism that you were discussing.
The role to start from the point to summarize at the end. The point is, unfortunately, that today the point of view of those events during the Second World War within the majority, with the circles which are the most numerous within the Catholic Church, that means the majority of the Catholic Church is more radical in these explanations of the events at the end and after the Second World War than the Catholic hierarchy was during the Second World War. So many of the, or some, at least some of the members or high-ranking officials of this, within the Catholic Church today in Croatia should read what Archbishop Stepinac and the other high officials from the Catholic Church were saying about the Ustasha regime, about Ustasha state, and we would see obviously that they were more critical towards the Ustasha than the representatives of the church are today. They are speaking now about the Croatian forces. When they are speaking about Ustasha, they were not Croatian forces. If you want to speak about Croatian forces, it can be only applied for the partisans and not for some others. The role of the Catholic Church, unfortunately, was negative in the Second World War. Yes, they are saying that the Archbishop Stepinac was saving certain Jews, certain Serbs, Croats from the camps. That's true. That's true. Nobody denies that. At least not nobody whom I know, but nobody denied that. But on the other hand, and he was protesting. And even the Poglavnik Pavelić was informed about his protests. But he was, during the war, and during those 4 years, he was constantly backing, supporting the government. That means that he is on numerous photographs when there were ceremonies, when there were receptions, diplomatic receptions. He was always there. At the end, that was 15th of April 1945, the church issued a declaration, and it was 15th of April. The Red Army was already in Berlin, or practically in the suburbs of Berlin. So the Americans are not so close from the other side, so the war is lost. They issued a declaration that our Croatian state, that means Ustasha state, should be defended, that there is a beast which is coming from the east, which is red, should be confronted or should be fought. This is what they were saying. It was 15th of April. And I cannot accept, because Archbishop Stepinac knew perfectly what was happening in Jasenovac. He accepted the number of at least 30,000 people who were killed. It's a testimony of a parish priest from Jasenovac who was saying that he informed Stepinac, and Stepinac was noting these numbers and generally accepting them. So if you know that 30 to 40,000 people were killed, and they were not 30 to 40, they were more than 80, but let's speak about 30 to 40,000 people have been killed in Jasenovac. And you know that in many more other places, many people were killed for no reason, because they are Jews, they are Serbs, they are Roma, under that was the only genocidal reasons were there as a dominant reason why those people were killed. So if you know everything and then you opt at the end of the war, April 45, for that state, genocidal in character, saying that communists are Antichrist. If it's the argument to back one side and not the other, well, I think it can't be an argument, but this is how the church was behaving during the war.